I was born in the coal mining region of West Virginia, the youngest of 5 brothers. My father died in a mine collapse when I was 12, and my mother cleaned houses until her hands bled just to keep food on our table. I learned early that hard work wasn't just a virtue, it was survival. By 16, I was working double shifts at the local garage, coming home with oil under my fingernails and dreams bigger than the mountains surrounding our town. I met Sarah at a church social when I was 23. She was a teacher's daughter from the next county over, with a laugh that could light up the darkest mine shaft. We married 6 months later in a ceremony, so small it barely filled 3 pews. Our honeymoon was a weekend camping trip because it was all we could afford, but I swear those 2 days felt richer than any luxury vacation I'd ever hear about. Over the next 40 years, I built something from nothing. The garage where I started as a mechanic's assistant became mine when old Mr. Peterson retired. I renamed it Callahan's Auto, my last name, finally on something that mattered. Sarah and I raised 3 children in a modest house on Maple Street. There was Jennifer, our eldest, who became a nurse in Pittsburgh. Then came Michael, and finally little Rebecca, who everyone called Becca, the baby who grew up to teach elementary school just like her grandmother. Michael was different from the start. Where Jennifer had Sarah's gentle nature, and Becca inherited my work ethic, Michael always wanted more. He wasn't content with good grades, he needed perfect scores. He wasn't satisfied with making the baseball team, he had to be captain. I told myself it was ambition, that drive to succeed. Sarah worried it was something else, something darker, but I brushed off her concerns. He was my son, after all. My only son. When Michael graduated from college, a business degree I'd helped pay for by working 70-hour weeks, he returned home with big plans. He wanted to modernize the garage, turn it into a chain, expand across 3 states. I listened to his pitch over Sunday dinner, watching his eyes shine with that same intensity I'd seen since he was a boy demanding to win at board games. "Dad, you're sitting on a gold mine," he said, pushing aside Sarah's pot roast to spread papers across the table. "But you're thinking too small, too local. We could franchise this, hire a management team, and you could finally retire. Really retire." Sarah caught my eye from across the table. That look we'd shared for decades, the one that said be careful without words. But I was 62, tired down to my bones, and the thought of slowing down sounded like heaven. "Let me think about it," I told him. Over the next 6 months, Michael worked on me like water on stone. Every visit came with new projections, new possibilities. He'd bring his laptop, show me spreadsheets I barely understood. Jennifer called from Pittsburgh, concerned. "Dad, I don't trust this. Michael's always been. I don't know how to say it without sounding mean. Your brother's just ambitious, honey. Nothing wrong with that. There's ambitious, and there's something else. Remember how he borrowed my college fund that summer? How you never got that money back?" I did remember, but I'd convinced myself it was a youthful mistake. Water under the bridge. Michael had apologized, sort of. He'd said something about a business opportunity that fell through, about how he'd pay it back double someday. That someday never came, but I'd let it go. Family forgives, right? The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. I was in the garage office, the space that still smelled like the cigars Mr. Peterson used to smoke 20 years ago. Michael walked in with a man in an expensive suit, someone he introduced as his attorney, Philip Chen. "Dad, I've been thinking. Before we move forward with the expansion, we should protect your assets. Estate planning, you know? Make sure everything's secure for you and Mom." It sounded reasonable. At 62, with a bum knee and high blood pressure, maybe it was time to think about these things. Philip Chen, polite, professional, armed with documents, explained how transferring certain assets into Michael's name would protect them from potential business liabilities and ensure a smooth transition when the time came. "It's just paperwork," Michael assured me, his hand on my shoulder. "Everything still belongs to you. This is just smart planning. For Mom's sake, really. You want her taken care of, don't you?" I signed papers that afternoon. I signed them because Michael was my son, because the lawyer seemed legitimate, because I was tired and trusting and stupid. God, I was so stupid. Sarah noticed the change before I did. We were at the bank 3 weeks later, trying to transfer some money to help Becca with her student loans from her graduate degree, when the teller's face went strange. "Mr. Callahan, I'm showing that you're no longer the primary account holder on this account." The floor seemed to tilt. "What do you mean? This is my account. I've had it for 35 years. The teller, a young woman named Melissa who'd known us for years, looked genuinely distressed. According to our records, Michael Callahan transferred primary ownership 6 days ago. You're listed as a secondary user with limited access. Sarah's hand found mine, her grip tight enough to hurt. Edward, what did you sign? That night, I called Michael 17 times. 17 calls that went straight to voicemail. I drove to his apartment across town, but his neighbor said he'd left for a business trip that morning. When he finally called back 2 days later, his voice had a coolness I'd never heard directed at me. Dad, calm down. This is part of the restructuring we discussed. Everything's fine. You took my bank account, Michael. That's not restructuring, it's in the family trust. It's all legal, all proper. You signed the documents, remember? Or are you starting to forget things? Maybe Mom was right about you needing to step back. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a chemical fire. Was he suggesting I was senile? Incompetent? Son, I need you to reverse this. Right now. I can't do that, Dad. The paperwork's already filed. Look, I'll come by next week and we'll talk through everything. I promise, you're worrying over nothing. He didn't come by the next week, or the week after. When I tried to access the garage's business accounts, I found those had been transferred too. The building itself, the garage I'd owned for 23 years, was now in something called Callahan Holdings LLC, with Michael as the sole managing member. I hired a lawyer, a crusty old veteran named Tom Bradford, who'd handled my divorce cases and property disputes for other people in town. He spent 3 days reviewing the documents I'd signed, and each day his expression grew darker. Edward, I won't sugarcoat this. These documents are airtight. You signed over primary control of almost everything, the business, the accounts, even your house on Maple Street. There's a clause about incapacitation or diminished capacity, which basically means if Michael can get a doctor to say you're not mentally competent, he can restrict your access to everything. Can we fight it? We can try, but it'll cost $50,000 just to start, and even then, the outcome's uncertain. You signed these voluntarily, with a witness present. Unless we can prove fraud or undue influence, which is nearly impossible when it's family. I left Tom's office feeling like I'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Sarah was waiting in the truck, and when she saw my face, she just pulled me close. We sat in that parking lot for 30 minutes, not speaking, just holding on to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. The confrontation happened on a Sunday, 3 months after I'd discovered what Michael had done. He finally agreed to meet at the house. His house now, technically, though Sarah and I were still living there. He showed up in a BMW I'd never seen before, wearing clothes that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. Becca was there too. I'd called her, told her we needed family witnesses for this conversation. She'd driven 7 hours from her teaching job in Maryland, her face tight with worry the whole way. Michael, I started, trying to keep my voice steady, we need to talk about what you've done. He settled into the armchair, my armchair, the one I'd sat in for 15 years with the casual confidence of a landlord. What I've done? You mean what we agreed on? What you signed off on? You lied to me. You made it sound like paperwork, like protection, not theft. Theft? He laughed, actually laughed. Dad, you're being dramatic. Everything's still in the family. I'm managing assets you weren't capable of managing properly. The garage was barely profitable under your watch. In 3 months, I've increased revenue by 40%. By firing half the staff. By replacing quality parts with cheap imports. By making smart business decisions instead of running a charity. You always were too soft, Dad. Too worried about being everyone's friend instead of making money. Becca stood up from the couch, her voice shaking. How can you talk to him like that? After everything he did for you? He paid for your college, helped you through 3 different business ventures that went nowhere, gave me what I earned, Michael interrupted, and what I deserved. You think it was easy being his son? The great Edward Callahan, beloved mechanic, pillar of the community? Do you know what it's like living in that shadow? Having everyone compare you, expect you to be some kind of saint? The words hit like physical blows. This wasn't my son talking, or maybe it was, and I just never wanted to see it clearly. I want my life back, I said quietly. Everything you took, I want it back. Michael stood, straightening his expensive jacket. That's not going to happen, Dad. But I'll tell you what, I'm not heartless. There's a property I've been meaning to develop, A cabin about 40 miles north of here. Belonged to the estate of someone who defaulted on a loan. You and Mom can stay there, rent-free. It'll give you both some space to adjust to retirement. A cabin? Michael, your mother has her book club here, her church, her whole life. The cabin, or you figure out your own arrangements. Those are the options. Oh, and Dad? He pulled an envelope from his jacket. These are eviction papers. You have 30 days to vacate this property. I'm selling it to developers. Already have an offer. He left. Just walked out, climbed into his BMW, and drove away from the rubble of our family like it was nothing. Like we were nothing. Becca stayed with us for 3 days, sleeping in her old room, making phone calls to lawyers who all said variations of the same thing. Without money for a prolonged legal battle, our options were limited. Jennifer came down from Pittsburgh that weekend, and I watched my daughters cry together at the kitchen table, helpless to protect them from the pain their brother had caused. "Don't go to that cabin," Jennifer begged. "Come stay with me. We'll figure something out." But Jennifer had 2 kids of her own in a small house, and I couldn't burden her that way. The cabin I drove up to see at one cold afternoon in late November was worse than I'd imagined. It was barely weatherproof, with gaps in the walls you could slide your fingers through. No internet, spotty cell service, heated by a wood stove that looked like it belonged in a museum. The closest neighbor was 3 miles away. "I can't take you there," I told Sarah that night. "I won't." "Then where?" she asked simply. "We have $847 in the account Michael hasn't locked. That's not enough for first month, last month, and deposit on an apartment. And with my health." Sarah had diabetes, required medication, regular doctor visits. The insurance also controlled by Michael now covered most of it, but what if he decided to cut us off completely? In the end, we moved to the cabin. Jennifer and Becca helped us load what possessions we could fit into my old truck. I watched strangers, Michael's people putting a for sale sign in the yard of the house where I'd raised my family, where Sarah had planted roses that bloomed every spring, where we'd celebrated 37 anniversaries. The first week at the cabin was survival. I spent my days cutting firewood, trying to patch the worst gaps in the walls with materials scavenged from the property. Sarah organized our few belongings, trying to make the place livable. At night, we huddled near the wood stove, listening to the wind howl through the pines, and I felt older than the mountains surrounding us. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael, about where I'd gone wrong. Had I been too lenient, too strict? Sarah and I would lie awake, picking apart 35 years of parenting, trying to find the moment we'd failed him, or the moment he'd decided to fail us. The phone, an old flip phone Becca had bought us, since our smartphones were on a plan Michael controlled, barely worked at the cabin. 1 bar of service on a good day, none at all when the weather turned. I tried calling Michael that first week. I tried calling my former employees at the garage. The phone would ring and ring, or cut out mid-sentence, or simply display "no service" like a taunt. 2 weeks in, disaster struck. Sarah ran out of her diabetes medication. The pharmacy in town 30 miles away wouldn't fill it without proper insurance authorization, and when they tried to reach Michael as the policyholder, he didn't respond. For 3 days, I drove that 60-mile round trip every morning, trying to get Sarah's prescription filled, each time hitting the same wall of bureaucracy and unreturned calls. On the 4th day, Sarah's blood sugar spiked dangerously. I found her disoriented, sweating, confused about where she was. The closest hospital was 45 miles south. I drove like a madman, holding her hand, praying to a God I'd been angry with for months. They stabilized her, but the ER doctor pulled me aside with a grim expression. "Mr. Callahan, your wife needs consistent medication. What happened here could have been fatal. You need to resolve whatever insurance issue you're having, or what? Or watch my wife of 40 years die because our son had decided to play God with our lives." I called Michael from the hospital payphone, 52 times over the course of 8 hours. 52 calls that went to voicemail, that rang until the automated system cut me off, that disappeared into the void of his indifference. I left messages that started calm and deteriorated into begging. I'm not proud of it, but I begged my son to help his mother. Finally, near midnight, he called back. His voice was annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. "Dad, stop calling. I'm at a business conference in Atlanta. Your mother's in the hospital. She needs her medication. The pharmacy won't fill it without insurance authorization, and you're the only one who can." I'll deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow? Michael. She almost died today. She needs... I said I'll deal with it. God, you're so dramatic. She's fine, isn't she? The hospital took care of it. We have to pay out of pocket for the ER visit. That's $3,000 we don't have because you stole. I didn't steal anything. And if you can't manage a simple prescription refill, maybe you really aren't capable of managing your own affairs. Maybe the decision I made was the right one. The line went dead. He'd hung up on me while his mother was in a hospital bed 20 feet away. That night, sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the ER waiting room, something inside me broke, then reformed. Harder, sharper. I was done being a victim. I was done begging. It was time to remember who I'd been before all this. A man who'd survived poverty, who'd built something from nothing, who'd weathered every storm life threw at him. The next morning, I used the hospital's social services office. A kind woman named Patricia listened to my story, made phone calls, and within 2 hours had connected me with an organization that helped elder abuse victims. That's what this was, she explained gently. Financial elder abuse. And it was more common than I'd ever imagined. They connected me with a pro bono attorney, Maria Gonzalez, who specialized in exactly these cases. She reviewed my documents over the phone, asking pointed questions I'd never thought to ask. Mr. Callahan, this Philip Chen Michael's attorney, do you remember seeing his bar license number on any documents? I hadn't. Maria spent the next week investigating and discovered that Philip Chen wasn't a licensed attorney in West Virginia, or anywhere. He was a friend of Michael's who'd played dress-up for an afternoon, complete with fake business cards. That single fact changed everything. Fraud. Impersonation. Suddenly all those airtight documents, Maria said, became evidence of a crime. But Maria warned me. Building a case takes time. Months, maybe longer. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself and your wife. Do you have anywhere safe to stay? Jennifer and her husband cleared out their basement. It was cramped, but it was warm, and most importantly, Sarah could see her doctors regularly. Becca drove up every weekend, helping us document everything, every bill Michael had ignored, every asset he'd seized, every lie he'd told. Michael didn't call. Not once. For 2 months, as we built our case, as Sarah regained her strength, as I remembered what it felt like to have my daughter's support, not a single word from my son. His social media showed him traveling, celebrating, living large on money that wasn't his. The first call came on a Wednesday afternoon in February. I was helping Jennifer's husband Mark install new shelving in his workshop when my phone rang. Michael's name on the screen after months of silence. Dad? His voice sounded off. Stressed. Dad, we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. The garage, there's been a problem. The bank is saying something about irregularities in the loan documents. They're threatening to... I hung up. 2 minutes later, he called again. I didn't answer. He called 17 more times that day, then again the next day, and the day after. By the end of that week, Michael had called me 52 times. The messages started desperate and became frantic. Dad, pick up. Dad, I need your help. Dad, they're saying you filed a complaint. Dad, please, we're family. Now he remembered we were family. Maria explained what was happening. Once the fraud was documented, the banks had frozen all accounts pending investigation. The garage's loan taken out in my name but signed with forged documents was in default. The house sale had fallen through when the buyer's title search revealed the suspicious transfer. Everything Michael had built on his house of cards was collapsing. There will be criminal charges, Maria said carefully. Wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. If convicted, he could face significant prison time. But Edward, you're his father. If you want to show mercy, if you want to offer him a way to make this right before charges are formally filed, I thought about it. I thought about mercy and justice and what kind of man I wanted to be. I thought about Sarah, confused and frightened in that hospital. I thought about Jennifer and Becca, crying at the kitchen table over their brother's cruelty. File the charges, I said. All of them. The day Michael was arrested, he called me one final time. Not to apologize even then, he couldn't manage that. But to rage, to blame, to insist this was somehow my fault for not understanding business and being too stubborn to just let him help. I gave you an option, he screamed into the phone. The cabin was generous. You could have just lived there quietly, let me handle things, and none of this would have happened. You're right, I said calmly. None of this would have happened. If I'd raised you to value people over profit, if I'd taught you that family isn't something you exploit, if I'd seen what you were becoming and stopped it before you destroyed yourself. I didn't destroy anything. You did this. You and your pride and... Michael. I stopped him. I'm done. I'm done arguing with you, done making excuses for you, done letting you hurt the people I love. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. I hung up for the last time. The legal process took 8 months. In that time, I got my garage back battered, barely functional, with half the staff Michael had fired unwilling to return. But some did. Old Jimmy, who'd worked for me for 15 years, came back the first week. Never felt right without you, he said simply. The house on Maple Street? Sold. The profit, what was left after Michael's debts, went into a trust that neither he nor anyone else could touch. Sarah and I bought a smaller place, a cozy bungalow with a view of the mountains and a yard where she could plant her roses again. Michael was sentenced to 4 years for fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. Reduced from the potential maximum because he had no prior record, because the judge saw a young man who'd lost his way. I attended the sentencing. Jennifer and Becca, didn't they said their goodbyes to their brother long ago. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood. Your Honor, that's my son. I raised him, loved him, tried to give him every advantage I never had. I failed him somewhere. I don't know where, don't know how, but I accept my part in it. But I won't accept being his victim, and I won't enable him anymore. Maybe 4 years will teach him what 62 years of my example couldn't. That real wealth isn't what you take, it's what you build, what you earn, and who you lift up along the way. Michael stared at the floor through the whole statement. He didn't look at me once. Now, 2 years later, I'm 64. The garage is profitable again, not fancy, not expanding across 3 states, but solid, honest. I hired 2 young mechanics from the community college, teaching them the trade like Mr. Peterson taught me. Sarah's healthy. Her book club meets at our house twice a month, and she's got rose bushes that are about to bloom for the second spring in our new place. Jennifer's kids call me Grandpa and climb on my lap to hear stories about the old days. Becca got engaged to a high school teacher who appreciates her kindness. And Michael? He writes letters from prison sometimes. I read them. I don't respond yet, but I read them. Sarah says maybe someday I'll write back. Maybe someday he'll apologize for something other than getting caught. But here's what I learned, what those 52 desperate phone calls taught me. You can't force someone to value you. You can't make them see your worth, recognize your sacrifice, or respect your love. All you can do is know your own value, protect it fiercely, and surround yourself with people who understand that families are built on more than blood. They're built on loyalty, honesty, and the willingness to show up when things get hard. Michael showed up when he wanted something. Jennifer and Becca showed up when I needed everything. That's the difference between a title and a relationship. Between being called someone's father and actually being family. The letters keep coming. Short ones, sometimes just a few lines. Dad, I'm sorry. Dad, I didn't understand. Dad, can we talk when I get out? Maybe. Someday. When sorry means making amends, not making excuses. When understanding comes with change, not just words. When talking means listening to more than his own wants. But that's his journey now. Mine is tending my garage, loving my wife, spoiling my grandchildren, and teaching 2 young mechanics that there's honor in hard work and dignity in doing things right, even when doing things wrong might be more profitable. I was born in West Virginia coal country to a widow who cleaned houses, and I built a life, lost it, built it again. And that second building taught me more than the first ever could, that what you create with integrity can be stolen, but who you are cannot. Michael took my money, my house, my business. He couldn't take my character. He couldn't take the love of my daughters or the respect of my community. He couldn't take the man I'd built myself into over 60+ years. And in trying to take everything, he lost the only thing that ever really mattered, his family. Every time I see his handwriting on an envelope, I remember those 52 phone calls. The panic in his voice when his world collapsed. Part of me, the father part that never quite dies, feels sorrow for him. But a larger part knows this is exactly what he needed. To fall completely, to face real consequences, to learn that actions have costs beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Sarah says forgiveness is for us, not for him. That holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She's probably right, she usually is. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean opening doors that need to stay closed. So the letters pile up in a drawer in my workshop, unread by Sarah, unopened by the girls. Just me, alone with envelopes I'm not ready to answer but not quite willing to throw away. Because he's still my son. And maybe that's the hardest lesson I learned in my old age, that love doesn't stop, even when trust dies. That you can mourn who someone became while remembering who they were. That choosing yourself, protecting yourself, doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It just means you've finally learned that you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is your own child. The garage door opens. Jimmy's bringing in a '98 Chevy with transmission trouble, and I've got work to do. Real work. The kind that fixes things rather than breaking them. That's enough legacy for me.